The room went quiet the moment my uncle stood up. Not the polite kind of quiet that falls over a dinner table when someone taps a glass for a toast. The kind of quiet that happens when everyone suddenly realizes something is very wrong and no one knows whose side to be on yet. My uncle looked straight at me across the table and said, loud enough for every single person in that room to hear, I want to know why the business account has been drained, and I want to know why your name is the last signature on every withdrawal. I set down my fork. My hands were completely still. My voice, when it came out, was barely above a whisper. I have no idea what you're talking about. My cousin laughed. Actually laughed. And that sound, that specific sound, is the one I keep coming back to. Because that laugh told me everything I needed to know. He already knew exactly what I was going to find out. He just hadn't expected me to still be sitting at that table. Let me start at the beginning. My name is Caleb. I am 31 years old. 3 years ago, I co-founded a logistics software company with my cousin Marcus and his best friend Donovan. We called it ClearPath Solutions. It was my idea, my code, and for the first 18 months, my apartment served as the office. I worked 16-hour days. I skipped my best friend's wedding because we had a deployment deadline. I did not take a single day off in the first year. Not one. Marcus was the business development guy. Charming, well-connected, knew how to walk into a room and make people want to sign things. I was fine with that arrangement. I trusted him. He was family. His mother is my father's sister. We grew up in the same neighborhood in Columbus, Ohio. We used to build computers together in his garage when we were teenagers. I genuinely believed that history meant something. Donovan handled operations. He was competent, quiet, and I thought loyal to the business. I did not know then that his loyalty had a price tag, and Marcus had already paid it. By the end of year 2, ClearPath had 4 enterprise clients, a team of 9 people, and the valuation that made my hand shake the first time I saw it written down on paper. We were not rich, not yet, but we were undeniably real. We had built something. I had built something, and then I started noticing things. Small things. First, a vendor invoice I didn't recognize, a software license renewal for a tool we had stopped using 8 months earlier, an expense report with a conference listed that I was never told about. I flagged him in our shared accounting dashboard and waited for someone to explain. No one did. When I brought it up casually in our weekly meeting, Marcus said the accounting software had been glitchy and that Donovan was cleaning everything up. I believed him. I wrote it off as growing pains. I went back to work. Then the first client called me directly. Her name was Patricia Chen, and she was the operations director at one of our largest accounts. She called my personal cell on a Tuesday afternoon and asked me, very calmly, why the integration her team had been promised in our contract renewal had not been delivered, and why the customer success manager assigned to her account had not responded to a single email in 3 weeks. I had no answer because I did not know what she was talking about. I did not know about the contract renewal. I had not signed it, but somehow my name was on it. I went to Marcus that same evening. He told me Patricia Chen was difficult, that she had unrealistic expectations, that he had handled the renewal personally and everything was fine. He told me to let him manage client relationships and focus on the product. He used the word lane 3 times in one conversation. Stay in your lane, Caleb. This is my lane. We both need to stay in our lanes. I stayed in mine. For another 4 months, I stayed in mine. Then the email came. It arrived on a Wednesday morning from our company bank, flagged as a security alert. It was a notification that a secondary signatory had been added to the primary operating account. The signatory was not me. The signatory was a company called Meridian Advisory Group, LLC. I had never heard that name in my life. I called the bank immediately. The customer service representative told me the change had been processed with valid authorization documentation and a signature matching the co-owner on file. I asked which co-owner. She paused, then said she could only confirm the change was processed through a valid request, and that if I had concerns, I would need to visit a branch in person with identification. I drove to the branch that afternoon. I sat across from the branch manager, a patient man named Gerald, and I watched his expression change as he pulled up our account history on a screen. He did not say much. He printed several pages, slid them across the desk, and told me I should consult an attorney before doing anything else. I sat in my car in the bank parking lot for 45 minutes reading those pages. Over a period of 11 months, $263,000 had been transferred out of ClearPath's primary operating account. The transfers were structured carefully, never large enough to trigger automatic reporting thresholds. Always on Fridays, always to the same destination, Meridian Advisory Group LLC, an entity that, when I searched for it that evening, had been registered in Delaware 8 months before the first transfer. The registered agent was a law firm. The sole managing member was listed as an individual named D. Walsh. Donovan's last name is Walsh. I want to be precise about what I felt in that moment because I think it matters. I did not feel rage. I felt something colder and more clarifying than rage. I felt the specific sensation of understanding something that had been true for a long time, finally becoming visible. Like when your eyes adjust in a dark room when you realize the shapes you thought were furniture are not furniture at all. I did not call Marcus. I did not call Donovan. I called my attorney, a woman named Sandra Park, who I'd been introduced to 18 months earlier at a startup networking event and who had given me her card and said to call her if I ever needed someone who liked complicated problems. I had kept the card in my desk drawer. I cannot explain why. Some part of me had been keeping it for exactly this moment. Sandra told me not to touch anything. Do not confront them. Do not log into any shared systems. Do not send any emails. Do not mention it to anyone in the company. She asked me to send her everything I had found and told me she would call me in the morning. She called me at 7:14 a.m. the next day and told me to come to her office. Sandra had done her own research overnight. What she found was worse than what I had brought her. Meridian Advisory Group had received transfers from 2 other sources beyond the operating account. The first was a client retainer fund, money paid upfront by clients to secure implementation services that had been redirected before it ever touched the main account. The second was a line of credit that had been opened in ClearPath's name 6 months ago against company assets, with Marcus listed as the sole authorizing officer. That line of credit had been drawn down almost entirely. The proceeds had gone to Meridian, total exposure just over $400,000. There was also the matter of my equity. Sandra pulled our original shareholder agreement and compared it to a document that had apparently been filed with the state as an amendment. The amendment reduced my ownership stake from 34% to 19%. The amendment was dated 14 months ago. I had never seen it. I had never signed it. My name was on it anyway. I asked Sandra how that was possible. She looked at me steadily and said that it was not legally possible, and that whoever had done it either believed I would never look or believed that by the time I did look, it would not matter. The family dinner happened 3 weeks later. I want to explain why I went. Sandra had advised me to continue behaving normally. Make no changes to your routine, she said. Show up where you are expected to show up. Do not give them any indication that anything has changed. I understood the strategic logic of this, but I will be honest. There was also a part of me that needed to sit across from Marcus at his mother's dining table and look at his face and see if I could still find the person I thought I knew. I did not find him. The dinner was at my aunt and uncle's house in Upper Arlington. My aunt had cooked for most of the day. There were maybe 14 people there, grandparents, cousins, spouses, kids running through the hallways. It was loud and warm, and I felt completely disconnected from all of it, like I was watching through glass. Marcus greeted me at the door with a hug, his hands on my back, his smile exactly like it had always been. I hugged him back and felt nothing but the precise recording of that moment, which I knew I would replay later. We ate. We talked about the holidays, about football, about my cousin Lydia's new apartment in Austin. And then, somewhere between the main course and dessert, my uncle set down his glass and asked how the business was doing. Marcus started to answer. I let him. He talked for about 2 minutes about ClearPath's growth trajectory, the new client pipeline, the operational improvements they have been making. He used "we" throughout. He did not look at me once. My uncle said that was great to hear, and then said he had actually been reviewing some of the documents from when he had co-signed an early equipment loan for the company. He had done that for us quietly when we were first starting out, and he had noticed some inconsistencies that he did not fully understand. He said he was probably missing context. He said he just wanted to make sure everything was above board. Then he looked directly at me and said what I already told you, he said. The room went quiet. My cousin laughed. And I said I had no idea what he was talking about. Because here is the thing. I did not. Not about that specific account. not the equipment loan account, which I had not even known my uncle still had access to. Sandra and I had found almost everything, but we had not found that piece yet. And in the silence that followed my answer, I watched Marcus recalibrate in real time. I watched him decide, in approximately 4 seconds, how to handle this. He chose forward momentum. He said he was sure it was a software error. He said the accounting system had been having issues. He looked at my uncle with complete confidence and said he would have Donovan pull the records and send a full reconciliation by the end of the week. My uncle nodded slowly. He did not look convinced, but he let it go. The conversation moved on. I stayed another hour. I helped clear the table. I said goodbye to everyone. I drove home and called Sandra and told her about the equipment loan account. She was quiet for a moment, then said, "That actually helps us." The next 8 days were the most focused I have ever been in my life. Sandra brought in a forensic accountant named Robert Hess. He was a compact, methodical man who communicated almost entirely in number lists, and who, I was told, had previously worked for the FBI's Financial Crimes Unit. He did not seem impressed or unimpressed by anything. He simply gathered information with the patience of someone who had done this many times and understood that the truth was always in the details, and the details were always still there if you knew where to look. Robert found the equipment loan discrepancy within 48 hours. My uncle had been right. Payments that should have come from the company's operating account had instead been routed, again, carefully, in small amounts, over many months, through a secondary account that Marcus had opened under ClearPath's name at a different bank. That account had a debit card. The debit card had a billing address in Scottsdale, Arizona. Marcus had purchased a vacation property in Scottsdale 11 months ago. I looked it up online. It had a pool. Robert also found the emails. They were not on my laptop or in my accounts. They were on a shared project management platform that the company still used, in a folder that had been archived and marked as a defunct client thread. Marcus and Donovan had apparently believed that archived meant invisible. It does not. Robert pulled the entire thread. There were 112 messages spanning 14 months. They described, in straightforward and sometimes almost cheerful language, the full plan, the equity amendment, the Meridian transfers, the loan routing, a discussion about the optimal moment to push me out of the company, a conversation about whether I would make noise or just go quietly. Marcus believed I would go quietly. He had written, in one message, that I was too conflict-averse to fight back. He had written a smiley face after it. I read that message 3 times. Sandra filed the suit on a Thursday morning. Fraud, breach of fiduciary duty, forgery, misappropriation of company assets, unauthorized equity dilution. The list was 8 items long. The second filing went to the state attorney general's office. Robert had identified conduct that crossed into criminal territory, specifically the forged signature on the equity amendment and the deliberate structuring of transfers to avoid reporting thresholds, which is itself a federal offense regardless of the underlying fraud. We served Marcus at the ClearPath office at 9 a.m. on a Friday. I was not there for the service. Sandra advised against it, and she was right. I heard about it later from the office manager, a woman named Priya who had worked with me since the early days and who called me that afternoon, voice shaking slightly, to tell me that Marcus had gone pale when the process server walked in, that he had said almost nothing, that Donovan had arrived 40 minutes later, and the two of them had locked themselves in the conference room for 3 hours. What happened next happened faster than I expected. Marcus's attorney reached out to Sandra within 72 hours. The message was framed as a desire to explore resolution. Sandra's response was precise: full financial accounting of every dollar moved, restoration of my equity to its original 34%, and a buyout of Marcus and Donovan's stakes at a valuation that reflected the actual financial state of the company minus the damage they had caused. The Scottsdale property would be part of the recovery. Meridian Advisory Group would be dissolved and its remaining assets surrendered. In exchange, and only in exchange, we would not pursue additional civil action beyond what was already filed. We could not control the criminal referral. That was out of our hands. Marcus countered twice. Both counters were rejected. He signed the agreement on a Tuesday, 26 days after the suit was filed. I want to be clear about something because I have thought about it a great deal. The question everyone wants answered is why. Why would someone do this to a person they grew up with? Why would Marcus, specifically, systematically dismantle the business we had built together steal from it methodically for over a year, forge my name on legal documents, and then sit across from me at his mother's dinner table and hug me at the door? I have a partial answer. Through the discovery process, some things came out. Marcus had significant personal debt that predated ClearPath. Gambling losses, a failed real estate investment from his mid-20s, credit card debt he had hidden from his family for years. The company's success, ironically, had made the pressure worse, not better, because it made his own financial situation by comparison feel like a failure he was actively concealing. Donovan had known about the debt for years. That was the leverage that made him a willing participant rather than just a witness. But I will be honest, the full why is not something I will ever entirely have. Some of it lives in a place I cannot access, and I have had to accept that explanation, incomplete as it is, because the alternative is spending the rest of my life trying to fully understand something that may not be fully understandable. People make choices. Sometimes the choices are monstrous. Sometimes the people who make them are people you once built computers with in a garage. The criminal case moved more slowly. The forgery charge was pursued by the state. Structuring charges were referred federally. As of the resolution of the civil matter, both Marcus and Donovan were under investigation. Their attorneys were billing them hourly for a problem they had created entirely by themselves. I returned to ClearPath with restored equity and a company that, despite everything, was still standing. The enterprise clients had not left. Patricia Chen, who had been one of the first signs that something was wrong, became one of my most important advocates during the restructuring period. She later told me she had known something was off for months. She had just not known what or who to tell. I brought in new leadership on the operations side and rebuilt the financial controls from the ground up with Robert Hess's guidance. I hired a CFO. I implemented dual authorization on every account above a minimal transaction threshold. I made it structurally impossible for any one person to do what Marcus and Donovan had done. The Scottsdale property sold at auction in the spring. A portion of the proceeds were applied to the recovery judgment. I did not look at photos of the property. I did not need to. My uncle called me 2 weeks after the settlement. He had heard everything by then. He was quiet for a long time on the phone, and then he said he was sorry. He said he should have come to me first that night at dinner, instead of directing the question the way he had. I told him he had nothing to apologize for, and I meant it. If he had come to me privately that night, instead of saying it at the table in front of everyone, Marcus would have had more time to cover the remaining traces. The way it unfolded, loud in public and right in front of the family, was the thing that finally made it impossible to contain. Sometimes the thing that looks like an attack is actually the beginning of the end of one. I do not talk to Marcus. I do not expect to talk to Marcus. There are people in my family who have maintained contact with him, and I have made my peace with that. Because I understand that family relationships are complicated and people process betrayal in different ways and at different speeds. I do not require anyone to choose. I only require that when I am in the room, the people around me understand what actually happened and why, and what it cost. What it cost me was real. 18 months of paranoia and isolation and the specific grief of losing trust in someone who had been part of your life for as long as you could remember. There were nights during those 8 days of investigation when I did not sleep at all. There were mornings when I sat in my car outside the ClearPath office and could not make myself go inside because I did not yet know who else might have known, who else might have been part of it, who else I had trusted incorrectly. What I found on the other side of it was clarity, not the cheap kind that gets packaged into lessons or sold as a personal growth arc. The real kind, the kind that costs something. I know now what I built. I know exactly what it is worth and how it got there and whose decisions were behind every dollar of it. I know which clients stayed because of the product and which ones stayed because of relationships and which ones left because of damage that had nothing to do with me. I know the full map of a company that I was, for over a year, systematically prevented from knowing. And I know this. The account is accurate. Every number checks out. Every signature is mine. I am not afraid of anyone who wants to audit that.